I'm really delighted to welcome you to the final dissemination webinar that our community, the Hybrid Advising Co-op, is hosting. And David, if you could please go to the next slide. I'll tell you a little bit more about the co-op. Today, our focus of this final webinar is going to be about building on our learning and partnerships for scale. And we're going to be sharing some of the learning that's come out of the co-op, and then talking about what do partnerships for scale look like. And I'll say more about that in just a moment. So the Hybrid Advising Co-op, if this is the first call that you are joining us, the co-op is made of 5 participating organizations that provide student access and success services, and have been working with how to integrate artificial intelligence and chatbots into their advising models. So specifically, we have Bottomline, College Advising Corps, KIP, Let's Get Ready, and One Goal as our participating organizations. And they have lovingly named themselves the Block community, which stands for the acronym for all of their names put together. So sometimes we refer to ourselves as Hybrid Advising Co-op, sometimes Block. This community has been served by the technical partner, Mainstay, as well, who's been a really fantastic partner in all of this work, guiding a lot of our learning. And then Shift and our team from Shift have been facilitating this community. So again, this community brings together these 5 organizations to learn faster together about this kind of evolving space about AI technology and how it can be used to benefit and advance student access and post-secondary success. And now this diagram here on the right looks quite simple, and I just want to throw in a huge thank you and acknowledgement to the 5 organizations and the many people that have been part of this community, because it has been a lot of work on their part. Every month they have been meeting and in webinars, sharing with each other. They've been testing and learning new ideas and sharing those ideas with each other, tracking the same data systems. And most recently, hosting these dissemination webinars and co-producing a playbook, which will be available shortly. And so I just want to give a huge kudos to them for all of their work, really, to advance student success and for the benefit of the greater good, and sharing all of this great information from their own organizations. This is a perfect slide to mention that this work is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Pathways team, and indeed, this is a pathway, and it's a very complex pathway. So you can see that students navigate, as they're thinking about their post-secondary life, a pretty windy and sometimes convoluted path as they explore, they prepare, apply, get in, enroll, matriculate, and attain their credentials to their next at their next institution. And you can see these are just a few examples of the many stepping stones and things in the way that students do on this path and on this journey. And along this journey, there's also a lot of handoffs that happen. Many of the people on this call, as well as in the co-op, are operating and functioning in different parts of this system to support students. So our conversation today is really going to focus on first of all, sharing some things that are coming out. I just got muted. So we'll be sharing out of the co-op some things that are very specific, that I would say almost even artifacts that the different organizations have developed and created as part of this work. And then we'll be kind of engaging in a larger discussion and dialogue around how might we coordinate and create partnerships to provide better support and more holistic support to students when they need it and how much they need it. We'll be seeing this slide again later, but just wanted to kind of give an introduction to it. So our roadmap for today, we're going to start, like I said, with this roundtable from the Hybrid Advising Co-op. We will have Bottomline, Let's Get Ready, One Goal, and College Advising Corps. I'm going to ask my colleague Shay Bloomer-Watt, who's the Director of Programs and who has been the kind of lead facilitator of this community, to moderate and that roundtable and to introduce the speakers in just a moment. Then we will for sure have time for questions as well, because I think you're going to be very interested in the things that they share. And so we'll have time for questions. And then we'll transition to a panel discussion. And Maurice McCulley, our program officer from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Pathways team, will be moderating that discussion with Laura Brennan from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, Lindsay Fifield from Georgia State University, and Carrie Claiborne from College Advising Corps. We'll give them a proper introduction as well when the time comes. And then at the end, we're going to close with some reflections. This is our final webinar. And so we will be asking all of our panelists today to provide a piece of advice, no matter where you are in your journey of creating a hybrid advising model, whether you're just starting or perhaps that you're well into pilot or implementation. I think their advice will be very helpful, and we would love to hear from you too. So maybe think about a piece of advice that you would share in the chat as well. And we'll certainly be compiling all this information. And then I'll just close up with a few next steps of what's to come. So again, Maurice McCulley is he's been co-moderating this entire series with me, and he is our program officer at the Gates Foundation. Also subject matter expert in this area as well. He came from KIPP in helping to develop their hybrid advising model. So it's been wonderful to learn from him throughout this process. So Maurice will be pitching in a little bit later. Thanks, Maurice. I see you in the chat here. Okay, with that, I think I'm handing over to my colleague, Shay.
Thank you, Karen. So I have the pleasure here of introducing some folks from our community. As Karen said, the co-op launched in 2022. It was a pilot space for organizations to learn from one another as they're integrating AI into their advising models. We've been bringing them together for convenings a couple times a year, and orgs have been testing changes that are aligned with their own goals and priorities. And they've been really extraordinarily generous with their knowledge and learning as they've done that work together. The sort of background of this work and where we're starting from is the idea that there's a set of conditions that need to be true in order for hybrid advising to be really and just as these orgs have worked on this set of conditions, and those conditions are a trusting relationship that's been established and maintained with the advisor and with the sort of chatbot interface, if that's applicable, having proactive and differentiated support for students, and then increasing advisor capacity to be able to intervene when there's really critical moments, and the kinds of supports that only an advisor can provide. And so these organizations have all been working toward these conditions and learning how best to create these conditions in their different models. And so today we've asked them to share some of their learning that they've sort of generated over the course of this experience. So I'd like to welcome Grace Bianchardi, the Chief Program Officer from Let's Get Ready, Haisu Ku and Kate Sweetman. Haisu is the Senior Director of Program Innovation, and Kate is the VP of Technology. Both of them are from One Goal. Emma Sabella, she's the Program Systems Manager from Bottom Line, and Toby Kinsell, who's the Chief Impact Officer from CAC. And we can go ahead and close out slides so that we're able to better see one another. There we go. And I'll just ask Grace to kick us off and sharing some of your learning and experience from the Let's Get Ready perspective.
Awesome. Thanks, Shay. So when we started at Let's Get Ready, we already knew when we started the co-op that we didn't want chatbots jumping into our near-peer conversations, our conversations between our students and their coach or advisor. But we were curious about some of the features, the AI features, and what the benefits might be. And one of our sort of biggest lessons through the hybrid advising co-op is that we have a lot of choice about how we can use the elements of hybrid advising. So like the humans, the text automation, the AI features, that we have a lot of choice in how we can use those features to meet the different needs of our students. And even like within our model, in different parts of our model, we can use hybrid advising differently. So just a little bit of context. Today, Let's Get Ready serving about 20,000 high school and college students from all over the country who are following a wide variety of post-secondary paths, have a wide range of needs, a wide range of preferences in terms of how much support they're already receiving, how much they need to receive from Let's Get Ready. They're all receiving peer mentorship from a paid college student coach. And we have some students who, they're talking multiple times a week to their coach. And we have some students who, they get all of our texts, they never respond at all. And at the end of the year, they say in our final survey, like, oh, that was so useful. Like, I did all the things you said. Thank you so much. Right. So as a result of those like very different needs, our model is kind of designed as a spectrum. So students have a lot of flexibility in terms of the amount of support they need. And we've played around a lot during the co-op with sort of how to use elements of hybrid advising to meet those like very different needs, knowing that different students need different sort of, access to humans, access to technology. So on the very lightest end of our model spectrum, we've got students who are getting kind of a standard weekly curriculum text message straight to their phone. And that is sent out from the like central team. And then their assigned human coach is there to respond to any message. So Let's Get Ready is one of the programs where we don't have chatbots responding to student messages. So their human is there responding. And what we're leveraging there is the kind of mass message and text automation features that are kind of allowing us to send batch customized messages using whatever information we've collected about students to tailor the messages to thousands of students at one time. And then we've got AI features running in the background to kind of monitor those messages for safety and extract any insights. And so in that lighter touch side of our model, like the coaches are really freed up, right? They're not sending individualized messages to the 2,000 kids on their caseload. They're not collecting individual information about students. Like all of that is happening in an automated way. They're just focused on providing the maximum amount of empathy and guidance and peer norming and troubleshooting as those text messages come in from students. And so what we've learned is that those text automation and those AI features, they allow those part-time coaches to be able to respond to a caseload of about 2,000 students, and they're able to sort of give a quick, like, nice job, good work on getting the classes that you wanted kind of message, but they're also really freed up to provide very in-depth troubleshooting for students, who send a message that gives us a sense that students need much more support with a much thornier issue. So through the co-op, we sort of explored how to leverage those AI features, those automation features to kind of maximize that efficiency for coaches and free them up to really focus on the support. On the other end of our programmatic spectrum, we've got students who signed up, they raised their hand for a super high level of personalization, right? They want a lot of hand holding. They are on a caseload with only 30 other students and their coach is doing all of the text messaging, lots of phone support, and it's 100% personalized. So when we started the co-op, we thought like, great, we won't have any elements of AI or automation in that side of our program at all. Like that's where it'll be all humans. And what we learned through the co-op was that actually there was real benefit to having some of the automation features, collecting some milestone information, for example, for students, so that the coaches aren't having to like track and hound students for that information. And some of that those automation features let us send those students messages that are tailored to their institution or invite them to a geographically specific event. And by having those AI listening features on, even in that really high touch program, it means that we can kind of sleep at night knowing that we're able to monitor all of the message conversations that are happening between a college student coach and their student. So I think one of our biggest lesson learned is the hybrid model and the features are very, very customizable, and that we can deploy them kind of across different types of program modalities, even within our one program, to be able to sort of identify students who need support and then be able to provide that support with efficiency and quality.
Thanks so much, Grace. One of the things that I've found really interesting in the conversations that we've had about the sort of high touch model and the low touch model, or the lighter touch model, is that idea that even when students opt into lighter touch or higher touch, over the course of their journey, frequently their needs change. And so rather than having these be two really separate tracks that need to accommodate students and have real-time data and understanding and communication with students to identify when they're needing a little bit more intervention or maybe a little bit less.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, by using some of the efficiencies of like the automation, for example, by making sure that those lighter touch coaches aren't having to individually send out messages to every single student sort of proactively, that's all happening in a batch way. I think that's part of why they then are freed up to be able to offer as much support as a student could possibly need when they identify themselves. So when the student responds to that message and they say, actually, like, I really am struggling with this, that coach can provide as much support as that student could possibly need. And they have that time to do that because of kind of some of the other efficiencies.
Thank you. I'm sure that folks are going to have questions. I want to go ahead and continue the conversation by moving over to one goal, and Haisu and Kate. One of the things that we've talked a lot about in your work is the way that you've been co-creating these processes with students and working in partnership with students. Would love it if you share a little bit of your reflections about that.
Yes, of course, I'll share a little bit about that. I'll just say that being part of the co-op, we learned a lot, and kind of similar to what Grace have said, there are many different type of approaches to hyper-advising, and it's really about understanding the value of your organization, the needs of your staff and the student to determine what is really the best fit. So at One Go, we have a classroom model supporting juniors and seniors. And once they graduate from high school, that's where we provide the chatbot support for them. And throughout the whole process, we were consistently engaging with our students and advisors. So for example, since the start of the pilot, we were getting feedback from the students, looking at trends and hearing the trends from our advisors, and then taking those feedback to test out the ideas and then monitor the results to inform that if we should continue to work on it or if we should abandon this idea. And one specific example is that when we first started out, we actually only sent out one message per week because we were assuming that it could be annoying if we send out like 2 or 3 per week. So when we initially only sent out one, we realized that we didn't get any traction or much impact. So we went back to our students and said like, hey, like, how are you thinking about the messages so far that you're receiving? What are you liking about them? And one specific thing that they said was like, I really do like the messages, and I actually prefer that if you send it more. I would be fine if you send it to me to 2 to 3 messages per week. We were like a little bit shocked. So then from there, we tried it. We sent out 2 to 3 messages per week. We monitored the opt-out rate, and then we noticed that there were no changes. There were no students that were opting out. So that was really exciting for us, and it was also really affirming for us in terms of what the students are telling us, that they find the reminders to be helpful. And even though that they might not respond at the moment, they will go back to the message later if they need the information later. And then because of this, we are actually creating a year-round texting curriculum to test and use for all our regions. So it's not just like a one-time message, but thinking about how we can scaffold these one messages to another that can help lead from awareness to action. So this is a current project that we are working on. And then in terms of getting advisor feedback, it was also really important that they are part of the process from the beginning, because it really helped build investment and buy-in. So when we first started, we actually asked them what they thought about the bot forward model or what they thought about the human forward model. And they were excited and they were interested in testing out the bot forward model. Of course, some staff are a little bit hesitant, but I think throughout the process, we were able to work through it together. And then one other thing that we have them do is that we really encourage them to develop these new messages, because we noticed that our advisors, when they create the messages, it's like interesting, it's exciting, and like they can add their own specialty and sauce to it. So for example, recently, one of our staff sent out this message that said, "Hey, it's your advisor's birthday and we would love to hear from you." And from this campaign alone, it actually got 20% engagement rate, and it also sparked some advising sessions. So we try to encourage our advisors to be with us throughout the whole journey. And they also know that creating a good tech tool takes time. So our advisors are invested to continue to improve and also refine the hybrid advising model. I'll also say that with the qualitative information that we get, we are also using quantitative information to let us know that if we are going the right path based on the feedback that the staff give us. So we will use Salesforce Syncs in Mainstay. We'll try to have personalized messages based on the information that we have of the student. And then one important thing that we learned from the co-op is that with every information that we collect from students, make sure that there's an action step. We don't want to collect information for the sake of just having the information, but why are we collecting it? How will we use the information to best support our students? And through Mainstay, we actually get a lot of engagement results and data. So like we spend about once a month with the advisors to look at the data, make meaning of the data. So then that way we can have this to help us improve our text campaigns for the next month. So I'll just wrap up here and say that like our students, the way that they engage with the chatbot and how they communicate is constantly changing. So what's true for 1 month can be different another month. So that's why we think it's really important that we continuously get feedback from our students. So it helps us to ensure that we are creating an impactful advising session for them.
Thanks so much, Haisu. I love hearing about the partnership with your students and advisors. And I know that it can be almost brave to be pushing the envelope in terms of the number of messages you're sending, because you don't want to lose contact with your students. And what better way than to ask them what they think. Thank you for that. I'm going to move us to Emma Sabella from Bottom Line. She's got a slide for us. Oh, shoot. And I was all prepared to pin you, Emma. So Emma's going to talk to us a little bit about some work that she did, understanding how advisors spend their time and increasing efficiency using AI.
Yeah, thank you, Shay. Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you all. So at Bottom Line, we have 2 programs. We have our Access program for our high school students and our Success program for our college students. And a few years ago, our Success program did a time study with the Mackenzie Scott Consulting Group, and they collected data on how much time advisors are spending in each of the categories that you see here. And from that, our Blueprint pilot program was born, which is actually what brought us to Shift, because we wanted to create more efficiencies for advisors. And so we wanted them to spend less time doing the administrative kind of boring tasks and spend more time meeting with students. And so Shift has actually continued that work for us and supporting that. And we have done a time analysis for Blueprint as well through our key driver diagram that Shift has helped us create the whole co-op and with the introduction of PDSAs. And so we're continuing to think about this work in determining what the right caseload size and advisor to student ratio is for the Blueprint program. And so the way that we implement collecting this data is that advisors submit a Google form on a weekly basis on how much time they're spending in each of these categories that you see here. So after they submit that information, our program evaluation manager then does an analysis on a monthly basis. So you can see the data here for February and March. One thing that we would like to importantly note here is that we don't use this method as a form of micromanaging advisors or making sure that we're knowing every little bit of work that they're doing. But instead, we are, again, trying to understand what the right caseload size is for Blueprint and what an advisor to student ratio would look like for us. And then also what our cost per student it can comfortably be for us. And so some differences that we've seen between our Success and Blueprint program models are that in our Success program, our caseload sizes average between 1 advisor to about 70 students. But for Blueprint, with the efficiencies that we have with our chatbot named Blue through Mainstay, we have an advisor to student ratio of 1 to 650 students. In our Success program, the amount of time that advisors are spending on direct service is 49%, but in Blueprint, it is 59%. And so we've definitely increased that efficiency there. And then for Blueprint as well, those one-to-one meetings take about a quarter of advisors' time, which is increased from Success as well. So as for formal like direct student support, we consider that one-on-one meetings, meeting follow-up, and any live chats that advisors are conducting in the Mainstay platform, which is text messages between them and students without the use of the chatbot. We had a decrease in one-on-one meetings from March to February because we participated in a program training, and so advisors had a little bit less time on their calendars available. But we've also made some adjustments in understanding how long advisors are spending resolving questions that have to do with the chatbot in Mainstay. And so we're trying to understand when the chatbot cannot answer questions and how much time advisors are going and spending and correcting that and increasing those live chats. So right now we're estimating that it takes about 60 seconds for advisors to intervene when the chatbot does not understand a question that a student is asking. But we're trying to understand if it takes more than that because advisors likely have to do some research. And an example of that is if a student is asking for a career resource or a scholarship resource, where advisors right now are having to do that research. And so we're understanding there as well where we can create some more efficiencies. The ultimate goal of us doing this analysis is where, as I've kind of been saying, those efficiencies can continue growing. And we want to confirm a hypothesis that advisors are in fact spending most of their time doing direct student support instead of those administrative tasks. We're also trying to understand where there are peak times of the year for different priorities. And so for this year, we'll likely see that in the January through April months, it was a lot about FAFSA, and that's what advisors were spending most of their time in meetings about with students. But where are there other peak times of the year and what consistencies are we seeing as well? And then lastly, we have goals of scaling. And so this is going to help us understand where we can scale and again, what our cost per student can be as we're continuing that scale.
Thank you so much, Emma. I think so many organizations come to this idea of integrating AI with a goal of scaling and a goal of really increasing how much time advisors are spending with students. And so it's just so helpful to have you be so transparent and sharing how you've been able to increase that caseload size and increase the time that advisors are spending with students. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I'm going to move us to our last but not least presenter here, Toby Kinsell from CAC.
Thank you, Shay. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here with you today. It's been great to learn alongside our fellow co-op organizations, as well as work with Shift and the Gates Foundation. So College Advising Corps works with 200,000 students across the country, served by 800 advisors in 16 different states. So at our scale, we came to this work wanting to make advising more efficient and effective through the use of artificial intelligence, and then learn how and when the chatbot is most effective with whom and about what? So those were our drivers, our aims in this work. So one of the things we piloted that I want to highlight for you today, and we can go to the next slide, is how we use data that we collected from our advisors and through data sharing with our partners, and combine that with data collected through the chatbot, specifically students' high school plans, their progress towards graduation, and what they're planned to do after high school. And we weighted those different attributes and data that we collected. So things like grade point average, eligibility for free or reduced lunch, perception of affordability, what kind of progress they had made towards post-secondary milestones. And we weighted those attributes and put them into a formula, and then tiered students into 4 different tiers: at risk, high need, on track, and high achieving. We called this AI tool for case management Tap In, and we can go to our next slide. Tap In stands for tiers aimed to progress individual needs. And we piloted this with our partners at Achieve Atlanta and Atlanta Public Schools. So specifically targeting some specific advisors, not everyone, in that Atlanta market, to use this caseload management tool to better target the students that they wanted to serve in the way that they wanted to serve them. And so focusing really on the students in red who didn't have any post-secondary plans, the students in yellow and orange, and to learn some things about those in green. And what we're learning from this tool, we've just been piloting it over the last few months. We're learning that our advisors are a lot more strategic using this data and this information. Our chatbot is integrated within our data management system. And so not only are they able to see the communication that the chatbot is having with the student and answer escalations within our data management system, but using this caseload management tool, they focus their time on those students in the orange and yellow, and have found that they're making the greatest gains with those students. So typically those students in the orange and yellow have done some things, but haven't completed all of their steps. And so by targeting those students, they're really moving them into green. And the green students obviously are the ones that are on track and don't need a lot of support and just need touch bases with each other. So we're finding this tool to be really effective. And what we want to do is further integrate this into our data management system where this is automated for advisors. So that's the direction that we're going into, where they can use this information to be more efficient and effective with their advising. And then I want to end with some ways that we've seen impact through the use of our chatbot. This is incorrect. This is from 2022, 2023. That's my typo. So, but this is from the last academic year. We did see with our similar type students, so we took out a lot of biases that occur within our data and how we compare students. And we compared like students with each other. So students that had similar attributes. We compared those that had chatbot messaging and those that didn't, and found that those that received the chatbot messaging had a 22% higher FAFSA completion rate, 18% higher college application completion rates and submissions, and 17% higher advisor meetings. And in fact, looking more closely at those advisor meetings, we found that the chatbot was a real driver for meetings after January. So those that had chatbot messaging had more meetings with their advisors after January. And then hot off the press, we have our enrollment data. So our college enrollment data for the class of 2023. We can go to our next slide. This is really exciting. It's the first time that we've been able to take a really close look at how enrollment may be different for students that receive chatbot messagings. Up here on the chart, you see 3 groups. Group 1 are students that opted out early from the chatbot. Group 2 are students that passively engaged. So that means that they received chatbot messages, but they did not engage with the chatbot. So they did not respond, answer any questions, or have any communication with the chatbot. And then group 3 are those actively engaged students. So they're students that responded to 3 or more messages within the chatbot. And overall, those students that were actively engaged had a 71% college enrollment rate versus the unengaged group was 68%. So we did see that they enrolled in college at higher rates. What's also very interesting is we saw the greatest gains with students that enrolled in 2-year colleges. So you'll see the unengaged students or the opted out enrolled in 2-year colleges at 16%. And those that were engaged enrolled at a rate of 28%. So we saw a greater increase within that group as well. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Toby. Really exciting to have your enrollment data also at this point to be able to share. We'd like to open it up to questions. I think it's just really interesting and exciting when you look at all these presentations together. We have an organization that's created a tool to identify those students that really need the most support. We have an organization that's working with their students to identify what does the best type of support look like. We have an organization who's working with their advisors to best identify how to support advisors to spend more time with students. And then we're looking at across our model, how do we be nimble and meet students where they are throughout this journey? And I just want to applaud all of you for the ways that you've been able to articulate these learnings that really are to the benefit of the broader field. And so we've got a question here. I've got a couple questions. The first is a question about the chatbots and whether those are generative AI or they're all traditional chatbots. My understanding is that we're still working with all traditional chatbots. Correct me if I'm wrong there, folks. Anyone from, I think that's right though. So Toby, question here about what data you're using for tap in.
I mentioned some of those data points. There are a lot of the data points that we collect. So our key performance indicators. So whether or not they've started or completed a FAFSA, started or completed college applications, had any meetings with their advisors, so one-on-one meetings with advisors. And then, like I mentioned, some of their demographic attributes. So that might be first-generation college student, eligible for free or reduced lunch, grade point average, those types of things. So they fall into 2 buckets. The activities that they've completed that show post-secondary enrollment progress, and then those demographic attributes.
Thanks, Toby. I have another question here about what some of the indicators that, I think this is a similar question, the indicators that informed that students needed the most support. That's a similar question, I think. Anything that you would add to that, Toby? Or actually, Grace, also, if there are indicators that you all are using to identify students needing the most support.
Like I said, those indicators are how far that they've progressed in their post-secondary enrollment steps. So if they've done the steps that they need to do to get to that point.
That's right for us too. So it's sort of like student report, mostly it's sort of like student report data in terms of like where they're at. I would add to the list of demographic data that Toby was listing to say that we, we see SAT score as being predictors, also like coming from a rural community as predictive as well. So some of those kind of additional demographic features.
Thanks, you too. I know I'm probably running close on time, but want to hold if there are any other questions. Okay, well, I want to just again thank the four of you and your organizations for your contributions, and these learnings will be documented at some level in the forthcoming playbook. So thank you. Thanks for that sharing.
Perfect, thank you. Just again, I want to piggyback on Shay's. I want to piggyback on Shay's applause for all of you and all of this work. It's been really tremendous to see what each of your organizations have generated and also shared with each other. It's been a great community of generosity. So thank you for extending that generosity beyond the co-op community to this external community to share some of these great insights and tools. So it's my pleasure to now segue to our second part of this call, where we'll have a panel of people from different parts of the student journey and system. And so we were actually very intentional as we planned this call and to build on this theme of scale, to look at organizations functioning at very different parts of a student journey. So we have Laura Brennan, who is the Assistant Commissioner for College and Career Advising from the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board. And the portfolio of initiatives that she oversees is quite extensive. Apply Texas, My Texas Future, Advise Texas, and ADVI, which is one we're probably mostly going to be talking about today, is the chatbot program. So you can imagine it's quite, when we talk about working at scale, it's quite a large scale in Texas. So thank you, Laura, so much for joining us from your very busy life to share your insights. We have Carrie Claiborne, who is the Chief Program Officer for College Advising Corps. And it's interesting because we also have Lindsay Fifield from the National Institute for Student Success. And Carrie recently was at the National Institute for Student Success as well, where he led student success efforts as well as implementation efforts. So we're really excited. Carrie kind of brings both of those perspectives with him today from access and success. And Lindsay Fifield, Senior Program Advisor for the National Institute for Student Success. And prior to her role at the National Institute for Student Success, she served as the director at Georgia State University to pilot, test, and scale Pounce, which is Georgia State's chatbot. And I'll just say Lindsay has also played as a real key advisor to the co-op as well. She's attended some of our convenings and she's helped think about the playbook structure and has really added a lot of depth of knowledge. So thank you to the three of you for joining us today to talk about this conversation around partnerships for scale. And when I say scale, I kind of don't necessarily mean scale in the traditional term as we think about going bigger. It could also be going deeper, not necessarily just reaching more students or more geography. It could also be about providing deeper services as well and coordinating handoffs. And so I'm going to invite Maurice McCulley to come in and moderate this panel. And thank you, Maurice, for moderating this very last panel of this dissemination series.
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to do my best. If you've been on any of the other webinars, you've seen me get a little excited by the fireside chats and the panels and go off script a little bit. I don't think this will be any different, but I want to make sure these amazing experts are able to share some of their expertise. So we're going to jump right in. Please use the chat. We'll make note of those questions and incorporate them in as best as we can. So I'd like to start off by asking each of the panelists to share briefly about your organization's approach to student support. And we put the graphic back up because I think it'd also be helpful if you could just locate where the student journey your organization works, or where you've thought about sort of the chatbot advising, because I know you all do a lot. So, but that context would be great. If we can start with Laura, then kick it over to Lindsay, and then close out with you, Carrie, on that question.
Great. Thank you so much, Maurice. I'm so excited to be here. This conversation has already been really great. So thank you to the previous presenters because that was great information. Anyway, as mentioned, I'm Laura Brennan and I'm Assistant Commissioner for College and Career Advising at the Coordinating Board. And just to kind of back up so y'all know where the Coordinating Board sits, in Texas, we have a tri-agency group. So we have the Texas Education Agency over K-12, the Coordinating Board partnering with colleges and universities for enrollment, matriculation, graduation, and then the Texas Workforce Commission, all about meeting workforce needs. So within the Coordinating Board, I oversee college and career advising, and we have a wide portfolio of resources, but really aimed at reaching not just the students directly, but also the supporters. So the counselors and advisors. So we have a resource called Texas OnCourse, which provides networking and networking opportunities and online learning opportunities for counselors and advisors in both K-12 and higher ed. And I mentioned that because it's incredibly important to be plugged into those directly in the field. I loved how one goal was talking about co-designing the solution and the advisors being key. So absolutely agree on that front. And then for our students, we have My Texas Future, which if you have not visited it yet, that's okay. It's rather new. We released it last year. It is a digital tool for all Texans. So that includes adult learners and then all the way down to like 7th graders who are in the planning and preparation process for higher ed. So perhaps if they're adults, they're returning to higher ed, or perhaps they're veterans and coming into higher ed for the first time. For 7th graders, it's about like that whole experience from middle school to high school. And then within My Texas Future and integrated is Apply Texas. So we're releasing a new Apply Texas in May, just right around the corner, a new experience that will basically take the information that's stored in My Texas Future and pour it over to Apply Texas to ease the application process for students. I mention that because Apply Texas is the key for us getting opt-ins for our ADV tool. So we have used Apply Texas as the mechanism for students to opt in to receive the text campaigns through ADV, our chatbot that we're talking about here today. And so when you look at the visual that Maurice has shared right now, we're really serving in that up to the matriculate. So we opt in the students who are seniors who are applying, and we're supporting them in the milestones that they need to take to get to that application. And then we're supporting them through the summer so that we recognize that summer is a critical period for students. So we support them through the summer, but we do not support them into the first year of college. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's kind of where we're situated in the student success efforts.
Thanks for that, Laura. And to sort of pick up where you left off, a lot of my work in the chatbot and AI enhanced technology space has really been at Georgia State. Our bots are very much leveraged from that admit portion all the way through to the attaining the credentials. A lot of what we have seen in our work at Georgia State is that these bots are pretty effective in assisting students navigating critical hurdles, not just to enrollment, but also to progression all the way through to graduation. And more impactfully so, we've seen that impact, especially support students who need that support the most, right? Lower income students, first generation students. That's really where we've seen sort of the benefit of these interventions work pretty effectively. At Georgia State, alongside not just the chatbot intervention, but really our entire suite of student success interventions, they've really focused on this idea of leveraging data to implement a program, to then produce additional data, to then inform additional implementations and that iteration of how things work on your campus. At the work of the NIST, we actually partner with institutions to walk them through this as well. How can we help institutions leverage their own data to identify their own equity gaps on their campus, to then inform which processes and which tools can be best leveraged? And in our case, a lot of what we are seeing is when it comes to communication, these sort of AI enhanced, human assisted hybrid sort of models are making a pretty big difference and proving pretty cost effective for the institution, but also really action effective for what they're trying to get students to do. So that's a little bit about Georgia State and the NIST. I work for the National Institute of Student Success. What we help other institutions do and what we've done here at Georgia State, and really where our chatbot efforts have situated is really past that matriculation point, not only up to it, but past it all the way to graduation.
And I will pick up here, I guess. Thank you for having us here, having me here as well. College Advising Corps, really, I love this visualization because for CAC, we kind of have this on two rounds. We leverage near peers that have navigated this process and then get them placed in high schools where they can most advise students on how to navigate this as they want to enact on that journey as well. So in that way, it's a double bottom line for us. It's both the advisor's experience, but also feeding that into the student experience as well. Our network, we are across 16 states. We have 33 programs. You heard from my colleague earlier that we essentially help about 200,000 students every year. At that scale, Toby's work really focuses on new innovations, technologies that will move that needle in a significant way. And my work within an organization executes that through our partner model with our 33 partners day to day. So I love this visualization because in some ways, we leverage students that navigate this one round and get them to go back through and help our students navigate it their initial round as well. So from that lens, our primary student experience is from that explore to right around that middle area, that fill out FAFSA area for us. That's where we're going to pick up and help students get to that admissions application acceptance phase of that journey as well.
Yeah, thank you all for that introduction to your programming. See some comments coming in the chat. We'll make sure to include those in as well. Carrie, I'm going to come back to you because I like what you said about the idea of students who completed the journey, then advising students who are on the journey right now. One thing we've thought about in this community of practice is centering the student experience and that overall desire to improve student outcomes. I would love it if you all could just talk about how you feel and think about states, college access organizations, and higher ed institutions working together, maybe in an exemplar as you see now, and then also in an ideal state. And then when we think about this idea of hybrid advising, Lindsay, I'm going to borrow some of your language, human in the loop, tech advancement, even more broadly, how are you thinking about that potential to evolve this support even further? So I think we kick this off, and then Laura and Lindsay jump in where it seems fit.
Yeah, sure. Fantastic. Thank you. So from my lens, given the work that I've done at Georgia State and with NIST and people like Lindsay for years, and now expanding that work from the student success lens into the college access, I think there's a couple of reflections that I'll keep fairly short so my colleagues have space as well. Institutions that are very data rich and resourced to do this work have the ability to deep dive on that student experience and really move the needle in a very significant way. And when you compare that to the college access space, sometimes data is very hard to come by. And there's this experience or the strategy for how we support students is something that a lot of people are passionate about. And you're now blending these two together. If you really focus on the student experience, you can work together as an organization to help students realize their dreams by coordinating these efforts in a very significant way, by bringing people that have that bird's eye view of all where we want to move the needle in a very significant way, and also leveraging the talents and tools and focuses of our respective organizations as well.
Lindsay or Laura, any reactions to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a tremendous opportunity in these transition points for students. You know, as institutions, we're very aware that students are actively making choices about which institution is right for them and which is the path forward. And that is a changing landscape as they go to enter this, right? Financially, time management, what they want to study, right? So there's a variety of sort of factors they're trying to weigh in. And as an institution, especially at that transition point from college to from high school to college, we don't always have access into that data, right? And so like we're not really sure until they show up, until they are in, you know, apply and are in sort of our pathways. But you know, I think where this opportunity lays is a lot of these access orgs, a lot of the coordinating boards have access to that student as they're coming into that institutional funnel. And so, you know, if they land at the institutional funnel, that's great. And we can handle the communication, but getting them to the right funnel and how are we sort of managing students through those like critical transitions, not just for them personally, but like even through the communication. Like students all the time will show up and be like, well, you know, Mike, I already talked to my counselor. They're referring to their high school counselor, which is no longer what we need them to be talking to at the institutional level, right? And so I think there's a real opportunity for what we can do and the solutions we can sort of make the more we do find collaboration among like these three different entities, and how do we best support students through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Echo everything y'all said. And I mean, honestly, it's a problem that we have not solved of how are we responsibly handing off or supporting through these transition points. When we have built this relationship with the students through, in Texas, ADVI, are there ways that we can more seamlessly hand off the student to be supported in the chatbot in their institution that they're attending? So like the questions that we're always asking are, you know, what systems or outreach services or advising services do our students or like future audiences that we're going to serve have access to? So it's really like who is being served and how, and then let's make sure we're not duplicating, because we don't want to all serve the same students and then leave some out. And so I think it's a really key question that there's a lot wrapped up in it in terms of, you know, not only data privacy, but then just like the facilitation of how you hand off a student in a way that makes sense and meets the needs of the student.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think it echoes a lot of conversations we hear around how do you make it a seamless experience from a student lens. We can have all of those sort of concerns on the back end, but how do we present it to a student in a seamless way? I think that's what I like about what each of you are saying and talking about. I know we probably have a couple college access organizations represented on the call as well. As they're sort of thinking about how do I approach a state agency coordinating board, or how do I approach a university maybe to help strengthen some of that handoff, even if not in a formal partnership? Or Carrie, in your role, how you've done that at CAC, what are some advice you may give to them or things they should consider going into those conversations and trying to sort of set up that handoff?
Yeah, I think one thing I would say that I hope Lindsay takes this and try, because we've worked together for so long. We have an old mentor colleague at Georgia State that said, used to tell us, no one else is coming, right? And at first, when you hear that, it's very daunting. What do you mean no one else is coming? But it's the idea of like, you thought of the thing. Don't wait on somebody else to come along and do it for you. Get out there and start talking it up. The only way you're going to know if a potential partnership would work or where it won't work, and that gives you a map to solve for, is to say the thing, is to get out there, start meeting with people. People like even Laura's group in Texas, we have a few programs, quite a few programs out there. And we talk through issues of what does this look like? What does the pipeline actually look like? And we have partners, we partner with Georgia State as well, to see even from that higher view as we ground that, where can we add value into the student experience? And Maurice, I would only like to circle back to, you said seamless experience. I think sometimes people get really focused on what is the seamless experience for CAC's chatbot experience, and it's really what is the seamless experience for the student. That's a flip on that people really got to take in stride. So that's what I would contribute there.
Yeah, I would just add on to that, it's not the seamless experiment or experience for CAC, but it is the student. So at the center, mapping everything that student is receiving, getting notices on, and we've done that in Texas. And honestly, it's scary to see all of the things that are coming at students at all these different points. And so I think to your question, Maurice, of like, okay, well, how can we move that? I think first is just mapping it and making sure we all have a clear understanding, a clear baseline of what the student experience is, and then identify, okay, where can we come together? Where can we hand off?
Lindsay, before you answer, I'm going to complicate your answer a little bit. Jason put a chat directly to you. Can you talk a little bit more about scaling interventions across the student life cycle? So maybe in your response, you can think about it as a GSU student and different departments. And his question just around what are the barriers? How do you communicate around those milestones, maybe within different departments? And then if you had something to that larger seamless experience as well. I don't want to stop you from doing that.
Yeah, I'm gonna flip it, Maurice. I'll get to the scale, but I'm gonna answer this one first, because something we found in our work with this whole idea of coordination, right, and how important it is for the student experience. In the work of the NIST, we worked with a few state-based systems, and it is common that this persists through higher education systems, right? Like if you pick up a student, can you identify what that student heard today? and we can't even do that inside institutions a lot of times, right? And so like now we're trying to actually say, hey, how do we do this through an entire journey of interest in higher education to to graduation and credentialing in higher education? And so, to me, it's a very common problem, and really the solution, I think, comes in being willing to de-silo, being willing to recognize the silo that you're in and get out of it, which is a lot harder than it sounds, to really find, the common ground and the way to advance everything. So, I just find it very interesting that like we can sit here and be like, it's about the student journey, but even once we get the student in a very defined space towards a journey, we're still having these problems. And with some of the larger state systems we've worked with, that same problem's happening everywhere. And it's and in every situation, well, we have students that transfer in. Well, they're at this institution and they need to get to this institution, right? And so how can these partnerships facilitate, and that coordination that's maybe happening at the beginning really be carried through the student cycle to credential? And that's an exciting sort of space that not much is being done too, for me, as I look at from sort of the college perspective. When you talk about scaling, to sort of circle back to your first question, Maurice, Georgia State started our journeys with chatbot in a very defined place. We had a very distinct data problem that we wanted to handle. It actually centered on admission to the university. Our summer melt rate was at a place that it was no longer okay with us. Taking that rate, looking at it, figuring out who was in this rate, our initial thought was, oh, they're going somewhere else. They weren't. These students were not attending higher education, right? So the largest portion of our summer melt rate was just students who weren't attending. We put our bot there, address those barriers, those administrative barriers, to get students to the enrollment section of that pathway. And then from there said, okay, well, now what? If it worked here, what else could we do? Students are happy with this technology. They're building a relationship. They're responding to it in exactly the way we want them to. So what else can we do? So then we started through really a series of randomized control trials and this level of coordination across student success. Like we worked from housing deposits to have you registered for next term, have you paid a balance, to really create a personalized communication journey for students. And that really helped, I think, strengthen our bot as we stair-stepped it up. We in no case did we launch to all of our undergraduate population. It was very much a test in admissions, a scale in admissions, a test in persistence, a scale in persistence, a test, an additional test, a scale. And what that really taught us all the way through was the resources that it was going to take to manage it, right? Like how much time was this taking? How much effort was this taking? And with the technology, to just make the technology stronger and stronger, to hold more and more as we build on those things. So that's just a little bit of our scaling journey and how we've sort of leaned into that. The next phase is really to see, did these bots make a difference in classes, right? And so we're really excited to sort of dig into the classroom experience of students. Because we know too, we start to talk access, we start to talk levels of preparation for, what sort of course is stopping them or hitting them early in their journey that's maybe causing some problems. And we've seen some really early indicators there too. And again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, it's to the students who need the help. It's to first generation students, it's to low income students, it's to traditionally underrepresented groups. These students need an assist and they're getting it through the bot. The bot's driving them to human resources, and that's sort of walking them through. And that scale recipes worked really well for us.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to pick up on what you said around next phases, and would love Laura and Carrie, if you could just comment in the spirit of continuous innovation and rapidly evolving technology, what opportunities are your organizations seeking to solve for or address, and towards this ideal of a holistic student experience? And if any roles you sort of see hybrid advising playing, either that's accelerating and or opportunities not yet explored. And yeah, I'll let you all decide who kicks it off.
I'll jump in. I think, there's so much moving literally every day. ChatGPT is getting better, and there are a lot of shiny objects out there. I think for us, we are just consistently focused on responsible innovation, and then thinking about how we keep the humans at the core. What can we do with the innovation that's happening to better support our humans who are answering the direct escalations from students? So how it works in Texas is, the student opts in through Apply Texas. We are sending them campaigns on key milestones in the college application, college planning process. And then if the bot is unable to answer a question, it goes to our human advisors employed by the coordinating board. One of the things that we're thinking about as we scale, because we hit the 1 million student mark, which is really exciting, we're also thinking about how we start serving the adult population too, so that when I mentioned My Texas Future serves adult students, we're looking at how we can serve them as well. And with that scale, we're thinking about, okay, how do we best support our humans who are at the center of this, who are our advisors? And one of the things is thinking about how we can better match the escalations to our knowledge base, so there are less escalations going to the humans that are driving this work. And then also how might we jumpstart the conversations leveraging AI, so that our advisors can see suggested responses, either use it, modify it, and send it, so that they're saving time in responding. And I'm sure this is the case for most of you, but during this financial aid application season, we have just seen extreme amounts of escalations to where it's just all hands on deck trying to get students these answers. So there's definitely a need for figuring out how we can better support our advisors with those ideas that I just shared.
Yeah, I would only add that I think for CAC, our next kind of evolutionary pieces are on two levels. Our first level is really about using AI, using chatbots to take away the challenging pieces of building a connection of support around a student. So our advisors, again, are near peers. They're just barely out of college themselves. And they come back, they really want to serve, they want to help their communities do that. But it's a complex area, it's a complex field to support a student in that way. So where are the places where AI really can augment the challenging pieces of building that connection and allowing for that connection to be really seamless and frictionless as we think about the student experience? As that relationship develops, Laura brought this up a little bit earlier, we're really actively thinking about ways that we can hand off that really rich history to the next level for a student. So how do we take this history and not have Lindsay's group at Georgia State start from zero? What are ways that we can do that without violating laws, with still being compliant with data sharing and things like that? But there's such a rich history that if you think about it from the student lens, they build up a connection and then they start at blank zero again and say, oh, I have to kind of go learn how to build this relationship again. And if there was a way to bring that over so it was frictionless for the student, then maybe those things like an invisible support net would be easier for a student to get wrapped in if you had that handoff. So it's something that we're thinking a lot about. And as you think about what Toby shared earlier about that tap in strategy, that framework, it allows us to say, what do we need to do at each stage here to really build a strong connection? And then once that connection's built, how do we keep that going for students that either go to a Georgia State or go to a less resource school, so that we don't have to worry about them or wonder if they're going to get the same level of support ongoing? So those are things that we're actively kind of engaging with.
Thank you all for those comments. I want to be mindful of time. I didn't see any more come in the chat, but wanted to just pause and see if there were any questions from participants to provide space for that. All right. Well, if you do think of any, you can still put them in the chat. If we can't answer them right now, we can definitely put you in contact with these amazing panelists, and we can answer them in other formats. I'd love to invite, if I get it wrong, just correct me, but Toby, oh, sorry, is that someone with a question? Maybe it's just unmute. I'd love to invite Toby, Kate, Emma, Grace back on as well. This has been a joyous experience thinking about how do we disseminate these learnings from the past. It's been a labor of 2 years, I must admit. It was one of the first projects I took on when I moved to the Gates Foundation. And I would just love it if each of you, I think I'm getting the signal, we have maybe like 1 minute each. What's the biggest piece of advice
moderates every panel
you would give to an organization that's like starting to build this, starting on this journey? Just that piece of advice would be great to just share. There's no order on my screen of how you all are. I can call you out, or if someone has it and you want to go, let's popcorn it around. But would love for you all to just share that piece of advice.
I'll go real quick and get us started. I think Laura said something about responsible technology or innovation. And I would add to that and say intentional. Be intentional. Think about the intentionality of how you want to use artificial intelligence. I think you heard that theme throughout many of the panelists' examples of how they're using AI. It is really attractive, and it is, one of the new shiny things, as Laura said. And being really intentional about how you're going to use it, how you set it up, the information that you want to share. And Jason Fife shared in the chat around emotional or behavior-centered messages and how you can incorporate those types of things. So be intentional.
I'm happy to go next because I want to build off what Toby said, and also was thinking about what Laura said about kind of shiny object syndrome. So yes, be intentional, and also don't lower your programmatic standards. Like the tools you use with students should improve your students' experience. They should improve the quality of your programming. They should improve your ability to like deliver culturally responsive programming. They should improve the impact for your students. And so like, don't lower your standards just because it's exciting and new and people have all these ideas about what you could do with AI. The question from my perspective is like, stay focused on like what you should do, and like keep your programmatic standards high when you're making those decisions.
Yeah, I'll jump off from there, building off what you said, what you should do, because mine is really think deeply about the problem. So what is the problem you're trying to solve? Who are you trying to serve? What are they already getting or what are they not getting? Because I think the worst thing we can do is just throw resources at the same students. So really thinking about the problem and then how you fit into it in your service to that student experience, and then make clear and get people to buy into your goals before even moving forward.
On the buy-in part, my advice is very much about how to do this with your staff and with your students from the One Goal side. A lot of us have been in this work for many years across many different organizations, and I have seen the buy-in be very low for new rollout and new tech that seems like it could be replacing humans, when really we're trying to augment and make sure people have tools and how the humans are doing exactly what humans do best. And so my advice on the best way to do that is to start with those staff, work together on it, and make sure that you have the really great organizational buy-in, and that it's not just your brain thinking about how could this help our organization, but you've got a great team who's thinking about it from many angles.
That's a good segue to my advice, which is to test with as small groups as you can. You may be really excited about a change that you would like to implement, but that may not resonate at all with students. And worst case scenario is you implement it to your entire program, and then you have to go back and reverse that change. So implement with small groups, get student feedback as much as possible, and then grow from there.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar to what Emma said too, in terms of like, sometimes I feel like when we go to implement chatbots, it can feel very big because we feel like we have to answer every question and we have to have a way forward for any question they could ever answer. That's not true, right? Bigger isn't always better. Sometimes better is better. Start focused with your problem, start focused with a smaller group, and then build your bot big. And in lessons in scaling that we've learned, I think that's my biggest takeaway. You don't have to build it this giant, you're not building a big ship to start with. You're building a series of smaller ships to get you to the big ship. And that really has been very informative with and informative with how we've scaled, but also strengthened our bot relationship with students. And that alone has resulted in a higher amount of action.
I will tell you one more thing just to add, because this was great so far. The single most invaluable thing that I've ever experienced in student success and college access is, are you ready for it? It's going to be amazing, right? When you get to a hard point where you think something is really difficult, talk to a student. Students will tell you exactly where they are falling off the path or why they're falling off the path. And that should drive your design, because we have our own problems for what we want students to do, and students have their way of navigating around this very weird, hard to describe field of college access and student success. Never be afraid to pull in a student and ask, why are you not doing the thing? What is happening here?
Yeah, thank you all for offering that. And I know you have so much more wisdom and advice that you could give, but I appreciate you doing it in that moment. Karen, if I could take moderator privilege for the last time, I just wanted to just virtually offer my round of applause to all of these organizations, all the subject matter experts that have been a part of this journey and process with us. It truly has been a labor of love and a attempt to really hone in on how do we improve student outcomes. And I appreciate all of you for that dedication. My reflection is if you have the right people in the right places, this work is a lot easier. Shift coming in and being able to facilitate this community, having organizations together and put aside the places in which there may be business considerations and really focusing and centering on the student has been amazing to see. And I just couldn't let this webinar end without saying thank you to all of you, the ones that are on screen, those behind screen, all of your teams, all of the convening time, and the asynchronous and coaching sessions. You all really poured into this in a way that truly the webinars don't fully encapsulate. But be on the lookout for the playbook. I think it will sort of point to a lot of those things as well. So thank you all again. Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you for closeout.
Thank you so much, Maurice, for those kind words. And it's hard to believe this is our last webinar. And I just also want to say a huge thank you to the co-op community and to our panelists who have joined us from outside the co-op. I mean, I guess everybody's part of the co-op now. Come to these. We've recruited you. And I'd also just like to take a moment to thank the Mainstay team as well, who've been fantastic partners throughout this whole work. And the team at Shift who's been doing sharing, pinning, chatting, all the slide stuff. So thank you all for making all of this work and the day-to-day work. Would love to hear from you. What are your biggest ahas from today's webinars? And I also don't want to assume that the panelists are the only ones that have big learnings to share. If you have a big learning that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. So please type in the chat box, share that with us. Or perhaps, something that you're taking away from today's webinar that will help you put this into practice in your own work. We will send you a survey as well, and we would love to hear your reflections. David, thank you so much. This is what I'm talking about. Thank you to my team. David, thank you. Amazing getting this link in the chat box immediately. We'd love to hear. It's a very brief survey, but I'd like to hear from you and get your feedback. And of course, please keep in touch. Here's our email. If you have any questions, if you want to be put in touch with any of the panelists or any ponderings afterwards, please reach out. So with that, we will close today. I will say the playbook will be available shortly, later this spring. And by signing up for these webinars, you are on a distribution list, so you will receive announcement and link to the materials once they are available. And I will say the organizations in the co-op are working very, very hard to contribute and add to that playbook. So it's going to be terrific, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you very soon. And the webinar link and recording will be coming to you soon. Thank you very much to all of the panelists today for taking time out of their busy schedules to prepare and join us today. And I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.